Welcome to Jet Virtual Academy. Today we're going to be looking at corrective colour. Our aim today is to achieve a rich, deep chocolate brown, but first we need to have a look at what we're faced with. So let's get our brains in gear and take on the challenge. We're faced with a head block consisting of varying depths and tones throughout. We have a black section on a base of a 2 and a level 7 khaki panel to the left hand side. Progressing to our front panels, we have a root smudge going into a base 10 and a pre-lightened section which is a base 10 all over. After assessing all the colours, my first point of call is to remove that depth 1 on the back panel, but I need to know what colours are going to be present when I lift. Underlying pigments are the natural pigment that make up every single hair colour. When formulating, you must take into consideration the underlying pigments and how they'll act. We either want to use it or lose it when we're referring to underlying pigments. On a base of a 1 or 2, we know the underlying pigment is going to be a really dark brown. As we progress lighter and lift, we then show redder, orange and yellower tones throughout the hair. Let me count how many shades I'm going to be lightening today to identify what I'm going to be shown. We know we're at a base 2. 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of lift will make me see a reddy orange undertone, so I know to expect this when I lighten. To get started, section all the other areas out the way to ensure you're working neat and methodically. When lightening the hair, we want to work on the mid-lengths first, then progressing to the ends and then slightly touching up towards the root area but not painted on the roots. We'll get to that part later. Using a spatula can make your sections neat and tidy and ensure that you get full saturation of the product. That means that the hair will be fully coated and covered evenly. Working in horizontal millimetre size sections will keep your work neat and also ensure that the hair is lifted evenly throughout. So why do we do the mids and ends first? There are varying reasons for this. One is that the mids and ends are previously coloured. This means that they're going to take more to shift that base up. Another reason for this is hair near the scalp contains more heat from the head, so that area will lift quicker. That's why we're leaving out those roots. Once you've given the mids and ends a little bit of time to develop and lift, you can then go back through and paint onto the scalp. Generally speaking, we want that root application to be on for around 10 to 15 minutes on average. However, if the client's natural base is present on the root area, you will find that will lift really quick. And remember, we only want to lift to around a base 6 and 7. Allow your lightener to develop. Always make sure you check your manufacturer's instructions for further guidance and to ensure you're using the product correctly. After the shampooing process, you can see that I'm left with an orange undertone. This was expected as we'd already pre-planned for this, so now we can work on the other sections. You can see that I don't need to touch that root. However, the mids and ends are going to need pre-pigmentation. The remaining back section does contain a khaki tone. To ensure that the whole result is even, I need to pre-pig that just to add a little bit of reddy copper to that mix. This will make sure the back's a little bit more even before colouring. Lastly, we have our compromised level 10 bleached section. During the pre-pigmentation process, I need to add a bit of depth as well as tone to ensure that that colour is even throughout. We'll get to that stage in a bit. So what is pre-pigmentation? It's the process of replacing underlying warmth that has either been removed through lightening or was never present. Think your grey and resistant hair types. You should pre-pig when going 2 or more shades darker. If the hair is porous and prone to fade, it's a good idea to pre-pig that hair. It ensures that the correct tone and depth has been established and also makes sure you get a durable, long-lasting result. But how do we know which tone to pre-pig with? We already know that the rule is that if the target shade is 2 or more levels darker than the current shade, we need to pre-pig it. Failure to do so will result in the reduced colour longevity and the infamous translucent khaki tone that you've seen on our head block. So now we have this knowledge, let's get to identifying the tone required. So when pre-pigging, always refer to your brand's undertone or RPC chart. We always want to make sure that we're replacing the undertone that you would require to achieve the target shade. For example, on a base 5, the undertone is already orange, therefore we need to apply a pigment that contains red and orange. Pre-pigmentation is so important to ensure a long-lasting professional result. The undertone supports the final shade in the same way a prime coat supports the final colour when painting a wall. The two work together in unison. Take a quick look back over the exposed or underlying pigment chart. Front pre-lighten section, I have selected Weller Colour Touch, which is a quasi-colorant in the tone 743. This will allow me to add the depth of a 7 whilst getting the tone of the 4-3 through that section. My reasoning for adding a little bit of depth to this pre-pigmentation is due to the fact that this section is the lightest on the head block. I need to add a bit of depth to get a fair and even result throughout. I apply my tone all over the mids and ends first using a sponge applicator. Apply the product liberally to ensure an even result. Work your way up to the roots and cover. I want this panel to deepen and develop whilst I pre-pig the other two areas remaining. So whilst that develops, I move on to the khaki section at the back. In order to understand how to remove the khaki green tone, I need to refer to the colour star. Directly opposite green on the chart is red. So I know I need to add a red pigmentation to neutralise. I have selected Weller Perfecton in the shade 4-3. This will add pure pigmentation with no depth. As you can see, the depth is already on a base 7. Working in small horizontal sections, I apply the Perfecton all over the mids and ends using my fingers to rub that product into the cuticles of the hair. I continue with this method all the way up to the top of the head. Make sure you give it a good rub with your fingers and a comb through to ensure even distribution. I am going to follow this method all the way around to the remaining side section as shown. I don't need to apply the Perfecton on the root area, as you can see this already has the base of a 7. Once the pre-pigmentation has been applied, we want to dry this into the hair. The reason we're drying the Perfecton in is to ensure the cuticles open to allow further product penetration. So here's my end result from the pre-pigmentation process. As you can see, we're starting to build a similar base throughout, but we know we have got a darker section at the back that we're going to have to match up to. So how do we do this? Let's take a little look. Using your colour chart, identify the darkest section's depth. I have identified the depth as in between a base 7 and a base 6, but because we want to achieve a nice rich chocolate brown, I'm going to aim to add a level 6 all over. I next need to identify whether to use a permanent tint or a quasi tint. I have selected the quasi tint in Wella Colour Touch. We recommend only using semi or demi colours when going darker, unless your client has 70% or more resistant roots. For this, we know we need permanent. The reasoning for this is quite pragmatic. You're first and foremost going darker, and as such, don't need to add any ammonia to open the cuticle. This means a peroxide stronger than 4% will add lift as well as tone, and because we only want to add depth and tone, we know it's a deposit only service. You may find that in using permanent colour ranges while just wanting to deposit tone could end up in the results being too warm or too light. Quasis, demis or semi-permanent colours are fitted with technology that will counteract the effects of overly porous hair. They are generally easier to apply and absorb better because they're mostly a cream or oil lotion consistency. Finally, because we know colour trends change all the time, if your client wanted to go lighter, removing a demi, quasi or semi-colour is a lot easier and gentler on the hair. The chocolate shade I have selected is 675. This will add brunette mahogany tones throughout, which will result in a really rich chocolate brown. I apply all the root area first using the hot cross bun or the quadrant sectioning technique. Always work neatly around the perimeter of the hairline to prevent staining. Once all the root area has been applied, you can progress to the mids and ends, starting from the nape of the neck and working upwards. Always ensure you comb every section to ensure even distribution of the product. Once your application is complete, clean round your hairline to ensure a neat result. Follow your manufacturer's instructions for development time. Remove your colour and check for even balance throughout. Dry off appropriately and check for any areas of lighter tone. It may be that if the hair condition isn't compromised, you may need to do an additional application. Here's our final result. We have achieved a rich, deep chocolate brown throughout the hair. Thank you for joining us today, and make sure to tag us in all your work on Instagram using the hashtag JetVirtual.